I made lots and lots of mistakes. I don't know how I survived it. I look back on that and it's like, well, some of those weren't obstacles, Court. Some of those were signs. I don't like things heading in the back of my head, right? If we have a problem, I'm going to tell you, right? Every time, 100% of the time. It's interesting. When you meet a person, you develop a communication style with that person quickly. Right, and it can be a good friend where you every time you see him, you insult each other.
Welcome to Hello Grow,
the #1 growth podcast in the world.
We are stoked to have Troy Mason on the show with us today.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Court. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
We're really amped to have you. Quick introduction of Troy before we jump in. Troy grew up in Utah, went into the Air Force out of high school, and then to the University of Utah, where he was studying to become an engineer. And from the family business, his dad had been in auto glass.
Not auto glass, just glass.
Just glass.
It's glass in general.
So Troy found himself going through college, working part-time for a glass company, and decided to start his own company in college, and had a conversation with a buddy who said, dude, what are you doing studying? Like, you're making more than you're going to be making as an engineer. And Troy left. Did you finish college?
My senior year. So what had happened is, I got out of the Air Force, didn't know anything, but I needed some income, right, as I'm going to school. The Air Force was paying for my college, so I didn't need a lot. So I got employment working for a glass company, making piece rate at the time, and then they wanted me to work full time, and I said, well, I don't want to quit school for you. And they said, well, we're going to need that vehicle you're driving for somebody that works for us full time. And so that led me to start a glass company. And so literally on the napkin at Village Inn, I didn't want to call it Troy's Glass, right? And so I started playing around with things, came up with Techna Glass. And that is, Techna Glass got started on the napkin at a Village Inn. And so still going to school. About a year later, the business had grown, and a good friend of mine who was also ex-military, I was taking every class with him at that time. We were both going for our electrical engineering degrees, and he had just finished a computer science project for me. He literally did 100% of the work, and we're studying for, I don't know if it was physics or calculus or differential equations, but we're studying for some test, and it's like 2:30 in the morning, and he's like, what are you doing, Troy? He's, you're already making more in this glass company you started a year ago than you ever will as an engineer. This seems like a good opportunity. You should see where this takes you. And so I give David a hard time. He was just tired of doing my homework. And so he wanted to offload a little bit from his plate and say, you should go do this, Troy. And to his credit, I did. And 35 years later, I'm still in the glass business and happy to be here.
So where that conversation took you in between now, or between now and 35 years ago, is one location, then two locations, up to 60 locations.
I wish I could say I started with a location.
I was going to ask about that. Did you have a garage? How did you start?
It was me in a 20-year-old van and remember those Franklin Day planners, Mm-hmm. I had a Franklin Day planner. I had one of those.
That's
old
on paper.
Yeah, and I had an old phone, those bricks with the antenna, and so I'd drive down the road with my 25-year-old white van and with my day timer, talking to customers, writing information down, going from one job. That's how it started. Me, a van, and an old I think it was Cellular One or something back then. Old cell phone. And I remember the cell phone bills being like $800 or $900 a month, because you paid by the minute back then. It wasn't like one of these all unlimited plans,
So that grew to 60 locations. You attracted a PE firm that came and invested, and went through $160 million that you guys spent in 18 months to buy a ton of other auto glass companies. You got to 140 locations.
Yeah, you cover years so quickly.
Well, we're going to get into the depth, but this is just the introduction. We're still in the intro.
It was like 30 years
We're going to go through,
somewhere,
just
It was
overnight
super easy.
success.
It was very linear, There's no ups and downs, no hiccups. Yeah, it was perfect.
When people keep listening, they need to know the caliber of person that is talking on the other side of the screen. And you guys grew to the second largest auto glass company in the nation and had the largest auto glass exit that's ever been had in the United States.
Yes, at the end, yeah.
And I'm sure it was all easy, which we'll get into.
It was super
why
easy.
It was so easy and so fast. And then after that, you went into retirement for a moment, and then you jumped back. Well,
4
started buying a
years.
bunch of planes, helicopters, hangars, and decided to jump back into the space. And now you're running the auto glass show for Caliber.
Yes, I work with Caliber, who is just a fantastic company, the largest collision company in the world. And they needed somebody to lead the auto glass division. And they asked me if I'd be interested. And about 5 months before that, I had a private equity company look me up, because I'd partnered with private equity, I had a good successful exit. And so, there was another private equity out of the Northeast that contacted me and said, we're interested in the auto glass space. Would you be interested in doing another auto glass acquisition roll-up? And so I talked to my wife, and we decided that, we would do that. And, I can go into more detail on that because that wasn't like the easiest of decisions either. But decided to do that. And then about 5 or 6 months into that, I'd been out visiting some auto glass companies, had six under LOI, and was about to pull the trigger on that. And then Caliber looked me up and met with me and said, we need a new leader of auto glass. Would you be interested in this? And so I talked with them, looked at that. Caliber's such a great company. They've got such a large infrastructure, lots of resources, good relationships with, like insurance carriers, and I thought, wow, I can really build a auto glass company on top of all this infrastructure. So yeah, I am interested, and so that's when I joined Caliber, and since being there, I can tell you the people are better than I thought, the company's better than I thought, and the opportunity is actually larger than I thought.
Wow. Well, the thing we're going to be talking about today is what you embody, which is leadership. I've had the privilege to know you for 4 years, see you as a mentor. You've talked me through some tricky situations and given me good counsel and shared some experiences of your leadership and what you did in certain situations that I've applied and reaped the benefits of applying those principles. So we have tons of questions for you on leadership, how to go from a leader of in a van with a brick phone by yourself to the second largest auto glass company in North America, probably in the world. And the first question that I have for you, Troy, on leadership is, I know there's a burden and a privilege of being a leader. And I'm curious about a situation or an experience that you had where it would have been easier to not live to your morals or your North Star and shrink as a leader, but you decided to step up as a leader and choose the hard path.
I don't, life is just about experiences and in learning from them. I mean, you can say, oh, something was a mistake, but if you learn from it, it was an experience that makes you better, right? And so I've had many of those that in hindsight you could come back and say was a mistake, and that's why I laugh. You go over these vast decades of time, and like, oh yeah, you went from here to here, and it was super easy. It was just very linear, and it was hell. And I made lots and lots of mistakes. I don't know how I survived it. Sometimes, I think my inclination is to like put my head down and work harder. I come across an obstacle, and I just put my shoulders into it, my head down, and I just work through it, and I bust through that barrier, right?
Does that always work?
Well, no, and that's kind of where I was headed. So over time, over decades, and with some experience, I look back on that, and it's like, well, some of those weren't obstacles, Court. Some of those were signs. They're like, hey, don't go this way, and instead of like pausing for a moment to read the sign, I just put my head down and I barreled through it. And then I look back and it's like, oh, this wasn't a barrier. That was a sign. And I didn't read it, and so I'd say some of, a few of what I would look back and call mistakes were me failing to stop for just a moment to like read the landscape and decide whether that was a sign or a barrier, and not just bust through signs.
I feel like that quality, every entrepreneur that is successful that I've seen has that quality, and that's why they're able to be successful. Because if they would have known how hard it was going to be when they started, likely they probably wouldn't have started.
Or would have shrunk at some point, because being an entrepreneur, like an entrepreneur too, right? I mean, there's a difference in where I'm at now versus being an entrepreneur. I got an $8 billion company behind me now with all kinds of resources. And, I have tons of resources at my disposal. Whereas an entrepreneur, you don't. And there's a big difference when the P&L, I have P&L responsibility right now. Mm-hmm. But there's a difference between having the responsibility and the ownership. Mm-hmm. Like literally, if I lose $100,000 this month, that comes out of my account. I've got to cover that. If I can't make payroll Friday, what am I going to do? There's a massive difference between being an executive and being an entrepreneur, and it takes a certain person, a certain attitude to truly be an entrepreneur and take on that responsibility and have P&L ownership for making sure you can make payroll this Friday. That's a different type of person, and it's hard. To your point, anybody that I don't know any entrepreneur that would look down the path and say, oh yeah, that was super easy, I think I'd do that again. It's the hardest thing in the world, and it does take a certain mentality deficit. I don't know what it is, but it does take a certain person to be able to do that.
Usually people go from growing inside of a company into an executive role, and then they go and start their own company. You did the opposite. You started your company, and then you became an executive at a super large organization. How did being an entrepreneur for so long help you or benefit you now at your current role?
Well, I don't know. Benefit's a hard one. I think it's that entrepreneurial spirit where you got to get it done, right? You just got to get it done. I think it hurts me a little bit. In an organization the size of Caliber, I've got to work with people, with other departments, with other leaders, and so, it's like, okay, let's make it so. Let's do this. Oh wait, I got to get somebody else to approve this. Wait, what's? No, I said let's go. And so there's a lot of that right now that I'm learning and working through. It's like, oh yeah, no, there's adjacent departments that are asking for the same resources that maybe I'm asking for, and it's not my sole decision to say yes, I want to go do that, or I want that resource, I want to go this direction. And so that's probably been what I'm learning, right? Because life is experience, life is learning, and that's what I'm learning now is how to work with those adjacent departments and ask for the resources and work together and not just be the decision maker.
There was one thing that you said a couple minutes ago, the difference between a sign and a barrier. I want to go back to that because I feel like in the moment, for someone who's just starting, it's probably very difficult to tell the difference between a sign and a barrier. In your perspective, what is the difference?
I think maybe I'm all about working hard and doing I have to get something done. But, I do think legitimately there were times that, maybe I had some adjacent information or from people that with some experience that were telling me, hey, this isn't the right decision or the right direction or whatever. And it's like, oh yeah, it is, I got to get this done. And I'd go through it and power through it. Cause that was always, my personality, my approach is just get it done, work as hard as you have to get through that. And in a few instances, I certainly won't say every time, but a few times I'd look back and it's like, I should have paused just for, I don't know if it's a day or a week or a couple hours, I don't know, but it just paused and really assessed the situation rather than just constantly put the head down and work through it and push through it. And so I think that's the difference, just maybe taking a little time and really assessing the situation rather than just bust through the barrier.
It's interesting that you say that, because I feel like the biggest mistakes I've made in business was listening to other people instead of my gut. And I know you're not saying don't listen to your gut and take advice from other people, but that's been my biggest downfalls, is when I asked a bunch of people, got advice, and they said, yeah, you should do this, and I knew I should do something else.
I have the same experience there too, Court. I remember bringing in some leaders and thinking, oh, you know what? I've got a strong opinion here, but they really think we should do this or they want to go that way. I'm going to let them own this, right? And I would let them own it, and then it would, even though I had a strong opinion, and then it would do what I thought it was going to do and be a mess, and then and so I do agree with that. I feel like those are mistakes, right? Where I had a strong gut and I let somebody else's opinion override mine, and then live to regret it. And I have had a few of those too. But I guess what I'm saying is, like, trust your gut, but take in all the information and you make the decision, because as entrepreneurs, we're the only ones with 100% of the information. We see the 360-degree view of the business, right? Whether it's from payroll, finance, marketing, operations, finance, right? We get the whole picture, where maybe we've got a leader that knows one or two aspects of it, right? And then they have an opinion based on those one or two aspects of the business, that direction, but they don't have the full 360-degree view that you do as the entrepreneur, the leader. And so you have more information. And so I guess that's what I'm saying. So I know a couple of times I'd empowered or brought in leaders for different aspects of the business, and then let them make decisions when I had a strong opposing opinion. And I'd say those were mistakes. I do look back at those and say that was a mistake.
So you want to just change directions for a second. You grew your own business to 60 locations and then spent $160 million to get it up to 140 locations. Each of those locations had a leader, and each of those leaders were bundled in under other leaders. The measure of a great leader is not the output, it's how many leaders can you create. And probably that goes into output as well, but the difference between a manager and a leader is how many leaders can you create, and you are phenomenal at that. I'd love to hear what input, advice, direction you gave to create leaders.
Boy, that's a really good question. I think you've got to have fun with your team. You've got to work hard. Geez, Court. What input? I guess trust yourself. Lead your people like you'd like to be led. I don't know that there's any secret sauce other than, build a. One thing I think is I've always focused on building a communication style, because it's interesting when you meet a person, you develop a communication style with that person quickly. Right, and it can be a good friend where you every time you see him you insult each other, right? or maybe it's, some other type of a situation where you thank them for their friendship, or it's interesting to me that me being the constant, I will act and communicate differently with different people based on kind of how we started this cycle, how we started that communication, friendship, or style. And so when I get a new leader, that's one thing I focus on is, building that communication style with them. How do I want that communication to evolve? What do I want it to look like over time? And I want to have fun with people. I don't like communication that's very, rigid and hey, what's the agenda? I'm not good in that sense. I want to build a good rapport with somebody, good communication style. I do expect them to work hard and communicate with me. I want the details. Don't let me find out something from somebody else. Don't give me a piece of the information. I just had a leader just recently that, he got some information he knew I wouldn't like, and so he didn't share it with me. And it's like, well, now I can't trust anything.
Right.
If you're not going to share all the information that comes across the desk that I need to know, then I can't trust anything, because I feel like you're hiding some. Are you giving me 85% of the information, or 100 or 95%? What are you holding back moving forward? And so that was, I didn't enjoy that.
I think that conversation, a lot of leaders or managers would struggle to have that conversation. How did you go about it?
Well, he doesn't work for me anymore, and I didn't take it well. I address things quickly. I don't also agree with. I don't like things hidden in the back of my head, right? If we have a problem, I'm going to tell you, right? Every time, 100% of the time, and that is probably one thing I try to share with new leaders is, don't let things build up. You don't want to get to a situation where it's like every Monday you do this, or every Friday you do this, or every time this happens, right? Well, if you say every time, then you've let things build up. Like if somebody comes in at 9:30 and you didn't like it, say, gosh, I was looking for you an hour ago and I couldn't find you. Was everything okay? Did you get a flat? Why weren't you here at 8:30 when I expected you? You need to address things like every time. 100% of the time. You can't let it build up. And it doesn't, and then by addressing it every time quickly like that, there's no emotion either. Like, I'm genuinely concerned, Cord, is everything okay? Like, for real. Like, I'm genuinely concerned. What happened? Why couldn't you be here till 9:30? Was there some tragedy or some situation you're dealing with personally that I'd like to know about? I can do that without emotion. If I don't address it, then the next time you show up at 9:30 and the next time you throw it up at 9:30, then I'm starting to get aggravated, and every Monday you do this. And that's just not productive communication. And so I do address things that come up every time at the time.
I love that. I think people don't realize that holding things back, the people that you're leading, they start having to read between lines, and that's just energy draining, right? It's just so good to work for a person that you know exactly what they think of you.
Well, we need to do that. There's we have to stop. We're working together because we have things to do, right? And so spending time worrying about this other thing that happened last week isn't productive, and it's certainly not good for them. If you're the leader and you're not communicating, you holding something back isn't good for them. Because when I stop talking to people, when I stop communicating, I'm planning their replacement. If I'm not communicating with you, it's because I'm planning your replacement, right? And it's not healthy for the relationship.
Could we get back to really early days in Techna Glass? You went from a solopreneur to first hire, second hire, and started growing your team. What needed to change about you as a 26, 27-year-old person to go from solopreneur to business leader?
Honestly, how to be in three places at once, and so I started my own business, and then 4 years in or something, I went from one location to three. within 2 months. I opened up my second and third right on top of each other. And it took me 6 years, I think, to open the fourth.
Really?
Because it was, I had a lot to learn. How are you in 3 places at one time? I'm kind of.
Were you the manager of each of those, or did you have managers at each of those locations?
I don't know. It evolved. And so, that was part of the issue was, how do you run 3 stores? I know how to do, I did well with 1, right? So how do you grow to that 3? And once I figured that out over like that 6-year period, right? That was me growing as a person. I did have a mentor at the time that was telling me, you've got to build these processes and these KPIs. You can't just go install. My default was to work hard, put your head down, right? And so, I'd show up. If one of the stores got behind, I'd run over there and I'd install and do what I could for them. And so it was about developing like trackable things I could hold you accountable for. It's like, all right, well, what did you do? When did your people come in? How many jobs did you get done? What was the customer satisfaction? Did you start building KPIs you can hold people accountable to and having conversations around. And then that's how you scale. Processes and KPIs is how you scale. And it took me 6 years to figure that out, and a lot of personal growth in that time frame. But I went from 3 to like 8 in the same year. So once I figured it out, I grew quickly again. And then we just kept growing because it became easy. Once you get the processes and the KPIs in place, and then it's just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, right? But it took me 6 years to figure that out.
How did you avoid, we talk about this often, it's exciting in the early stages when you're doing things for the very first time, but the greatest deterrent to success is not hardship, it's boredom, because you're rinsing and repeating over and over and over again, and that's where the money is to be made. How did you keep focused for so long, rinsing and repeating?
Court, I think I'm just dumb enough to go to work and do the same thing, like for real.
Smart enough.
No, honestly,
That's where the
I
money's
think
made.
there is, I have seen people that are way more intelligent than me, that to your point, they really struggle coming in and doing the same things you need to do to grow the next location, the next market, the next technicians, leaders, whatever it is, right? They struggle, and they always try to find like these shortcuts, right? I'm gonna shortcut this. I'm gonna do something different, and I'm gonna shortcut that, and they fail, And so I genuinely mean, I think I'm just dumb enough to come to work hard, and focus on the same processes and the same things.
You use the word fail. Were there any times, what was the whole span? How many years from when you started Techna Glass to when you sold?
1990 to now, so 34 years, yeah. And so I've been 4 years in this, so it was right at 30 years when I sold the first company, yeah.
So were there any times where you thought this is going to fail?
Yeah.
Can you talk about those, and how did you push through? And how did you give
I think
courage to the team?
the fetal position, and no, I remember the Great Recession, right? 2008, 2009, right? I am not joking. July, August of 2008, I was with my management team, and we are high-fiving each other, thinking we are just the smartest people in the world. Like, holy smokes, we are killing it. Our growth, everything was going nuts. Like, we were having the best year. We were about to open up the Denver market, and we thought we were just geniuses and just killing it, right? By November, we had an emergency board meeting trying to figure out how we're going to survive, and what a quick turnaround that was. And so September, it's like, all right, that's a little more of it. August was like, so this is like July, we were having this high five, we're geniuses meeting, and then August is like, yeah, it wasn't, it was a little softer than normal, right? And then September's like, wow, that was kind of a weird drop off. And then by November, we literally were calling an emergency board meeting. It's like, what are we going to do? And so I would say it we got through that okay. It was the winter of 2009. There's seasonality to auto glass, right? So it was the winter of 2009. That January, it's like, man, I genuinely don't know that I'm going to survive this. You know, I really wasn't sure.
After 18 years.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I really wasn't sure. And so I did what every entrepreneur did, and I stretched my vendors and bruised a couple of relationships and paid some bills late and got through it. And then, you know, March hit, the business picked up, and I started kind of growing it again. But, you know, I mean, at the expense of some relationships that took time to rebuild, and some landlords I had to, you know, catch up with. But yeah, that was a very tough winter. That was a tough time.
You mentioned relationships in there, and not the relationships with the landlords, but you have 5 girls, and you have twin grandsons on their way. Congratulations!
Thank you. That is super exciting for the entire family. Yeah.
One thing that's been very apparent to me, whenever we've been out at lunch, your phone's out, but you're not texting. You're never taking business calls. The only calls I've ever seen you take are from Haley or from your girls. And I'm curious about how you were able to grow such a successful business and grow relationships at the same time, because those are sometimes mutually exclusive.
You know, I don't think it's been seamless. You know, I think if you were to ask my wife or ask my children, I think there's going to be times they'll say, yeah, he, you know, worked too much, you know, and I think I probably did, you know. Even now, I'll be watching a movie with my wife and I have my laptop in front of me, and I'll be playing with data, you know, and I'll pull some report and throw it in a pivot table and start analyzing stuff. And, you know, my wife will say, are you working? It's like, I don't know if I'd call it work. I'm
semantics.
I'm playing with data, you know. It's like solving a puzzle to me. It's like, you know, you throw something in a pivot table and you start looking at data different ways. That's like, I don't know. For me, that's like doing a Sudoku puzzle or something, right? And so I'm watching the movie. We're here, you know, but I'm playing with data at the same time.
I'm gonna use that.
So
it happened last night to me and my wife.
I am speaking for like something that happened like a week ago. Yes. So no, I don't know. I mean, if you were to talk to my kids, you know, I think they will tell you. They can call me anytime, 24 hours a day. I will take their call. You know, if I'm in a meeting, I'll just say, "Excuse me, this is my daughter. I'm going to take this." And yes, you can imply from that she's more important than you. You know, and so I did learn to do that. You know, I wanted my kids to always know that their dad was there whenever they needed him. If they were calling in for school or had a situation, or soccer practice ended early and they needed picked up, I wanted to always be there for that phone call. And so that was, you know, the always being there for the family, the kids, no matter what time of day it was, no matter what meeting I was in, was something that was important to me, and I did prioritize. So you're right, Court. That is something I have focused on.
While we're talking about relationships, I've asked this question. Few people that came to the podcast, and I'd love to hear yours. What role has your wife played in your success?
You know, my wife is you know, fantastic. She travels with me a fair amount of the time now. She couldn't always do that, but we work together, and so she could solve some of the same problems. You know, I'll never forget. So like recruiting, you know, I mean, auto glass technicians are awesome. It is for sure a profession. It is a skill. But you know, I mean, it's hard work too, you know, and so, you know, sometimes it's hard to get the right person to want. People don't grow up and say, "Hey, I think I want to be an auto glass technician when I grow up," right? That nobody's ever said that, including me, and so you got to get people when they're young and interested, and you know, you offer them some training and some tools and a career path, and you're going to get a raise. And And then after a year, and they've gotten four raises, and they're making $5 more than they would somewhere else, and they think, gosh, I don't think I want to do this auto glass thing anymore. Yet they've bought a truck, they've moved in with their girlfriend, and now all of a sudden they can't take a $5 an hour hit in their pay to go do something maybe that they were thinking about. And so I call it, you capture technicians, right? You want them to buy that truck. You want them to get that apartment. You want them to rely on that extra $5 an hour you've been able to get them, because now they're going to be hardworking, dependable people, and that's what you're trying to capture. But I can't remember where that question was headed. But
Haley's role in recruiting.
Oh yeah, so Haley would recruit, and she'd sometimes give us a hard time. You hired them, And and so I remember one summer we were this goes back quite a few years now, but we were trying to hire some people, and our recruiter needed some help, and I said, hey honey, why don't you help hire people, right? And I remember she's in there, and she goes, I got this guy who came in, he's really a good guy, he does, he's got assault on his record, and so, he got his background check, and he does have an assault, but, it wasn't with a deadly weapon. And I just remember laughing my butt off. Here she was giving me problems before, because we'd make exceptions for good people that maybe made a mistake in the past, right? And then here she's in there advocating for this person with an assault on their weapon, on their background check, and yeah, but he's a really good person, it was a mistake. And I just remember that being one of the funniest things, is her previously giving me a hard time for making exceptions for people that had mistakes, and then her coming in there and then advocating for this one person. It was just a funny moment.
I love it.
So, but it was good. But there's a big auto glass convention every year, and she's always gone to all of those. Knows all my vendors. She'll always go to the dinners and stuff, and so all my vendors know her. The industry knows her, and I can't go anywhere at an industry event without them asking, "Oh, where's Haley?" And so I think that's good. She's involved.
Lee Iacocca, the Chrysler CEO in the 80s, he wrote a book called Where Have All the Leaders Gone? And he talked about leadership skills and abilities that he felt like his generation had. And now you being one or two generations after Lee Iacocca, and me being...
I remember Lee Iacocca. Sorry.
Maybe me.
He was CEO when I was running Techna Glass.
The black is slimming, and you look younger than you are. I'm curious, as you're recruiting a bunch of these young guys to be auto glass technicians and putting in leaders, what are some of the leadership traits that are great that our generation has, and some of those that are going to be detrimental if they're not fixed?
I think you hear that from every generation. Oh, this new, my dad. Oh my God. Oh, my dad. His favorite thing is I would hire somebody to work with him, right, and train with him, and they'd quit. They'd spend 3 days or a week with him and then quit, and because my dad would work so hard, right? My dad would work so hard and expect them to keep up with him, and they're like, "Hey, I'm not in for this," But that was for my dad, that was pinning a medal on his chest. This young guy couldn't hang with me, right? He that was like a badge of honor for him to work some poor young kid to the ground and have him quit.
Sounds like my dad.
Yeah, funniest thing. And so anyway, I think every generation, to your question, every generation says, "Oh, these new kids, they just don't do it." And honestly, Cord, I don't see it. I think there are absolutely hardworking, great people that are out there wanting to do what I did, and that is, find a good place, a good company, get a good job, and get a nice place to live, and a decent car to drive, and place to raise a family, and so I don't know that I see it. I think that every generation has the large percentage of it that are out there wanting the same thing we do. So
kind of following up on that question, when you're looking for leaders, and you have surely worked with probably hundreds of leaders, I'm always curious to know, do you think it's people are born that way, just with the leadership skill set, or it can be developed?
You know, I don't know. I do think there is a certain personality trait to it. I think there is I do actually agree that I think there is a personality trait to it that can make you a leader. Can you learn that? Yeah, probably. I think so. You know, my mom always told me, you know, when I was a kid, everybody played what I wanted to play or did what I wanted to do, right? When I went in the military, just a group of peers, you know, they put me in charge, you know, and I don't know what that is. I don't know, you know, I'm not bragging. I don't know what that is, but you know, yes, I would say I've always been a natural leader, for whatever personality trait that is. And I don't think it was something I learned. I do feel like it was a personality trait or an attitude I was born with or something.
And can you put your finger on what that personality trait is?
I don't know.
On people that you've worked with?
I don't know if it's I won't say it's a self-confidence, because like in high school, I don't think I had great self-confidence. I probably didn't learn self-confidence until I was in the military for 8 years. And, you know, I'd be with a group of peers, true peers, and they would choose me to lead this group, whether it was basic training or a technical school after that or whatever. And then, you know, I'm working with guys and, you know, like scoring in the top 5% or whatever. And so, that's when I will say I gained my confidence as a person, was in the military, and really excelling in the military. You know, it taught me a lot, you know, respect for authority, respect for education, to be dependable and reliable. You know, I mean, I loved everything about it. You know, I tell everybody the best thing I ever did in my life was to go into the military. And the second best thing I ever did in my life was to get out of the military. And but I wouldn't have traded that experience for the world. It really did shape who I am as a person today, for sure.
If there's one or two attributes that you would recommend people focus on to cultivate to be a better leader, what would those be?
Well, I think you genuinely have to care about people, you know, take an interest in them, care about them, you know, like that instance when you show up at 9:30, you know, I'm generally concerned about you, Court. What happened? You know, I don't go to, oh, you lazy bastard, you got up late and stayed up too late last night. That's not where my mind goes, right? My mind is something happened. What happened? You know, and so I think there's care about your people. Boy, I these are hard questions that, you know, I don't know that I have a direct answer to. It's just honestly 35 years of experience and lots of mistakes. You know, you hopefully you learn from them and you take that and move on and don't do it again. So I wish I could answer with some, you know, brilliant thing, and, you know, like success, you know, it's like, oh, what did you do? And it's like, honestly, I tried to make good decisions. You know, you take advantage of opportunities when they arise, and I think you have to put yourself in a position to be able to take advantage of opportunities when they do arise. And so, you know, there's no such thing as luck. I do think the ability to take advantage of opportunities, work hard, and treat people well. You know, I think 35 years in business, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that I'm not friends with. You know, like, I have a good relationship with everybody, always have. I've always treated people well, treated them fairly, treated them with respect, right? Everything we do, you know, like my technicians today, I respect the heck out of them. You know, I know what they do. I know how hard it is. I know what what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so, as a leader now, I focus on two endpoints. The customer, what's in the best interest in the customer, and what can I do to support the technician? Those are my two focal points. Me and everybody else in between, we're just support, so I have a lot of respect for my technicians and what they do and how they do it every day.
That's such a good focus and such a simple focus. It's probably why you've had so much success, is you're able to find simplicity after trudging through all the complexity to arrive at a very simple answer.
And I think I've had some shortcomings too. Like I went to school to be an engineer. I took physics and chemistry and calculus and differential equations, and it was more for science and engineering. So I can write a really mean-looking formula in Excel, but I didn't have a single business class. I didn't go to school for business. I went to school for engineering, and so I've not had that book knowledge, I guess, from being a businessman. It's just been based on 35 years of experience and mistakes and trying to learn from them. So some of these book answers on management styles or whatever, I don't have that. I didn't get an education based on that. I have experience.
With that being said, are there some books that you have read and that really helped to develop some leadership skills?
I've read, Good to Great and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I've gained stuff from that. But honestly, even some of that, I love to read. I'm an avid reader, always have been. But I've always had to trick myself. It's like, okay, you got to read 15 minutes of this self-help, management, whatever business book so you can get back to your novel. And so I've always had to I've truly had to make deals with myself. All right, spend 15 minutes reading this, and then you can go read your novel. And so it's not something. That's not even something that I can say has come natural to me. Even being an avid reader, reading some of those self-help books or business books hasn't been a natural thing to me. I recently read Your First 90 Days, obviously with my role here at Caliber. I wanted to come in and be ready, and I would say it was good, and it probably kind of focused a couple of ideas for me. It was a good book, but I mean, to be honest with you, I knew the industry. I knew what needed to be done, and I knew how to do it with or without that book. And again, I'm going to go back and say it was experience, that really shaped my first 90 days and what I knew needed to get done, and what I know I still need to get done, because I'm not there yet. But I'd say the book was helpful. It maybe sharpened a couple of thoughts. But overall, I think it was my experience and knowledge of the industry more than that book that prepared me.
I'm trying to analyze you, package you, and say, if somebody follows this prescribed Troy methodology, they're going to go have success. And as I'm listening, you just worked your butt off for 35 years. You were intuitively strategic, and you were gritty. And even though you pushed through some signs that weren't roadblocks, but they were signs, you still reached success because you were willing to outwork your problems.
Yeah, I'd say that is accurate, and that's why I was laughing at you at the beginning of this, and you're like, okay, you did this and you got here. And it's like, yeah, it was just this one linear line. It was just every year we just got better, and it's just not the truth. It's 30 years of true hard work, lots of mistakes, lots of lessons learned, but also being willing to take advantage of opportunities when they did come up, and and work hard. You know, I remember, I think it was up to, I don't even remember, 6, 7, 5 stores. I don't know. We had a competitor in the market that sold, and some big corporate thing came in and made all kinds of mistakes. And boy, you know, I had kind of figured out how are you in multiple places at one time, the whole KPI and the procedure thing. And so when that happened, I pounced. Every customer they didn't take care of, I was there to take care of that customer. And I had a real rapid, over that 2-year period, I think that's when I went from like 4 to 16 stores or something over a 2-year period. And we had a competitor that stumbled. It wasn't them, it was the company they sold to stumbled. And then, you know, we took advantage of that opportunity and had some real good growth in that period.
I think one of the hardest things is expecting this linear growth. And you've mentioned linear a couple times, and it's such a non-linear process. So non-linear, with different seasons, with ups and downs, and being able to have this competitive advantage that comes from just out surviving the long winter longer than the next guy can, so that when the spring comes, you can take advantage and go and sow so that you can reap when they forgot to sow.
Yeah, and I just don't know that, you know, maybe business at the corporate level is about, you know, we're developing a 5-year plan and strategic initiatives, and, you know, how do we strategize about this other national account, and how do we partner with them? And it's a little more strategic at that level, you know. But boy, as an entrepreneur, I don't know that there is a silver bullet. It's about servicing a need, right? Like a legitimate need. You solve a problem for somebody, and then you do it well. You do it better than anybody else, and take care of the customer, take care of your technician. You grow as a team. Cord, I wish there was some, you know, magic bullet, magic trait, but I don't see it. I think it is a true desire to take care of the customer, and to work together as a team. I do think I'm very collaborative. You know, I think decisions get made in rooms. You know, you get your top 3, 4 people in a room, and you talk about a problem that needs to be solved, right? Something that came up, some problem needs to be solved. You come in, you know, Court, you throw this in, and you have another idea, and I throw in a piece, and you leave the room with a solution, right, or a plan, and it doesn't belong to anybody, right? It's everybody's, you know. And so I'm very collaborative like that, and that's how I like to do business. You know, I don't like to sit there and think in a vacuum all by myself and say we're going this way. I like to really get my team involved and get everybody's ideas and experiences, and kind of solve problems, you know, as a team. I'm collaborative like that, and I enjoy that process.
Yeah.
Troy, when we're talking about those things right now, it reminded me. I wanted to ask you a question, but I want to give you a little bit of a background. Once upon a time, I managed a small team of people, and I made the poorest decision of my career. So a few people in that team, they didn't like a team member. So I put them in a room, and I said, just why don't you like this person? And just listen to them and talked about that. To me, that was the poorest and worst decision I've ever made, because we literally talked for 2 hours about someone that wasn't there. And I literally gave the wrong message to these people. Now that what's going to stop me from having the same conversation with other about them? And it just really, to me, it just felt wrong, and I left that room feeling terrible, and nothing that I said to my team, like, guys, I'm not going to do this about you. Nothing that I said would recover the trust that I just lost with those people. We talked about the personality trait, and your experience, and you attribute to that, you know, your leadership style. But was there a decision or something that you did as a leader that you really regret doing, or that you would tell a leader, hey, avoid doing this, just don't go there?
You know, I think the experience that you just shared is spot on. You know, I think that is exactly true. I'm gonna flip it around, and I'm gonna say, you know, again, this is not intuitive. This is learned through years of experience. But when you've got somebody that's not performing, whether it's a fit thing, like just a personality or a work ethic, or you know, a quality issue, whatever it is, you've got a teammate that isn't fitting into the culture and the rest of the team, right? And you're busy as hell, and you think, oh my gosh, I just got to put up with Paul, and then all of a sudden, this guy's not performing at the same level, not treating people well, not doing the same quality, and then all of a sudden, but you're putting up with Paul, and all of a sudden Mark leaves, you know, because Mark lost respect for you. You know, your superstar says, you know, why is he putting up with Paul? You know, Paul's doing the shitty job and he's just putting up with it. I don't want to work for that guy anymore. They go find another place to work. And so by putting up with Paul's, right, you lose your great people. And so I learned at some point, I wish I could tell you where on the spectrum that was, but at some point you don't put up with Paul. Right? If you've got somebody that's not a fit, doesn't have the work ethic, doesn't have the quality, attitude, whatever it is, even though it might hurt in the short term, if you hold on to him, you're going to end up with a company of him. And so you've got to make the sacrifice and let him go, deal with the short term pain, and get a replacement that fits. You cannot put up with bad attitudes, poor performance, whatever that fit was. You can't put up with it, because you will lose your good people, and they will lose respect for you, similar to what you were just describing. So that is one lesson that I learned somewhere along the way, fairly early. You
Don't put up with Pauls.
don't put up with Pauls.
Can you fix the Pauls in your organization, or you just got to let them go?
You know, I do think there's underlying things that aren't fixable, right? I don't believe people change all that much. They may adapt a little bit, but you know, if it's a training issue, like if it's quality and maybe there's some tools or some training or mentoring you could give him, that's one thing. But the desire and the attitude have to be there. You know, if he's shitty, and he's damaging, in my case, vehicles or something, and he doesn't work well with the mentor and doesn't want to learn, doesn't want to do it our way, then yeah, no, I think there are things that you're not going to change, and you just need to cut bait and, you know, give them an opportunity to excel elsewhere, and give yourself an opportunity to improve, right? Because if you put up with Paul, you're also not likely to replace him. You know, where if you give him an opportunity to excel somewhere else, and now you've got a gap, you're going to be more motivated to replace that, and you're going to increase your talent at the same time. So I guess I would say, with some level of compassion, try to help. You know, if there's something you can do, but you know, if attitude or desire or something then is not there, then that's hard to change in people, and people don't tend to improve on those things often. And honestly, it's not giving you the full story, not giving you all the information. You know, I think there's things that people can do that if you lose trust or respect, let's call it respect more than even trust, right? I think it's human nature. You cannot like somebody that you don't respect. And so that is something I tried to train young managers on. You know, as I would elevate somebody to be a store manager or something, you know, I would try to work with them and say, look, you've got to hold people accountable, right? You got, if they're not there, and maybe this guy's late every Monday, and you know, you're there at 7:30 as the manager, you cover for him, and you're able to do it. But then let's just say there's some Monday and all of a sudden your child is sick or your wife needs a ride to work or whatever, and you can't be there at 8 o'clock. Now we have a customer at that store at 8 o'clock, and Paul isn't there again, right? And then you get a call from me saying, hey, I just got a call from the customer. There's this customer at the store at 8 o'clock. There's nobody there. I'm coming down on you as the manager. And then you start yelling at Paul. Well, it's your fault. You didn't hold him accountable, and now it's affecting you. So I would try to train my managers to hold people accountable, and then back to the respect thing, right? As you're letting Paul get away with that, not showing up on time, or maybe cutting a corner on in my case, an installation or whatever, he actually is losing respect for you, because he knows that he's supposed to do it different or behave different or show up differently, and you're letting him get away with it. And so the whole time you're like trying to be friendly or create a friendly environment or a peaceful environment or whatever, Paul's losing respect for you as a leader.
And all of Paul's coworkers.
Yeah, and all of Paul's coworkers. Yeah. And so back to that comment, try to think of somebody, Court, that you don't respect, that you like. You can't do it. It's human nature.
I'll be thinking for a long time.
It's just one of those truths. You can't actually like somebody that you don't hold respect for. And so when you lose the respect of your peers or the people that are working for you, they don't like you. And so that whole reason you're letting them get away with something or letting something slide, you want to create you want them to like you or something. They're losing respect for you, and they can't like you, because you cannot like somebody that you don't respect.
Wow.
I have one more question before we wrap up. Carlos, anything you want to ask before?
No, I'll be pondering on that for a long time. No more questions for me.
You're sitting across from your 28-year-old self. You can pick maybe 28-year-old self or 2008 self. What advice do you give?
Honestly, I think it would be, like slow down a little bit. I do. It's like that put your head down and blow through the sign comment I made earlier. I think I push, and it's an attribute. It's a thing that's helped me with life, but it's also a thing that has brought me lots of opportunities to improve on, and lots of mistakes have been made for the same reason. And so, maybe 85% is a good speed. Maybe slow down just a little bit, be a little more thoughtful, a little more strategic, and less just push through everything. That's a tough one. Honestly, enjoy the people you're working with. They are family. They're after the same things you are, and have fun, have tons of respect for everybody that's working around you, because they deserve it. Everybody deserves the respect, from everyone, because they're working hard and doing the best they can, and that is worthy of respect by itself. But tough question, Court. Slow down. Don't believe your own hype. I think there's a time in life you're doing well, and you think you're doing well, and you believe you're doing well, and then all of a sudden you act like you're doing well. And I call that like believing your own hype, right? And sometimes it's advantageous for people that work for you or work with you to hype you up, right? You're dealing with a vendor or a customer, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Troy, that's sometimes helpful." But man, as leaders, we can't believe it. We've got to know that we're one step away from the edge. and we're making it up as we go every day too, and just doing our best. And so I think that's another thing is don't believe your own hype. Deep down you're one step away from that edge, and you're not as great as maybe you appear to be or whatever. And just be humble and don't believe your own hype. Just lots of people could do what we do, and we're lucky enough to be the ones making the decisions at that level. And I do feel lucky. I am happy to be where I'm at. I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing, and I feel lucky to be here. There's also, it's funny. We've talked a lot, but I've got so much we didn't talk about.
Is there anything you wish we would have talked about that we didn't get to?
Oh, just that 30 years we blew past.
We're going to need to have you here again.
It just, when you look back on, unfortunately me at my age, a career, right? A life's work. That's how I look at it. It's my life's work. Back to believing your own hype. It can look like, oh my gosh, you're just super successful. You did this, and it's like, no, it was hard as hell. I made a ton of mistakes. There's lots of things I could have done better. There's lots of things I could do better today, and so, the journey is a journey, right? And you have to get to it one day at a time. You make the best decisions you can with the information you have at that moment. I think that's something else, Cord, I would say. Make a decision, right? No matter what. People that sit there and wallow in indecision, I think that's the biggest mistake, right? Make a decision. And as you make a decision and you start going north, as you go north, you'll get more information, right? And God, you could be going the wrong damn way. Well, because you went north, you now know you're going the wrong way. Turn around, right? But if you just sat there, you wouldn't have known that. And so, that's something I feel like I've done well, is take the information you have at the time and make a decision. As you make that decision and move that direction, you'll get more information. Feel free to make a different one at that time. You don't have to stick with it. I hope that's helpful.
Unbelievably helpful, Troy.
I wish I felt like it was helpful. I wish there was some nugget of truth that I could just share with people and say, hey, do this and this will happen. But it's just not my experience. That is not my experience. There is no truth. There's just, honest, hard work and willing to put the time, effort, take care of your customer, take care of your people, and work hard every day and try to make the best decision with the information you have at the time.
We often say heavy, there's a quote, it comes from Shakespeare, it's been slightly changed, but heavy lies the head that wears the crown. And it talks about the burden, also the privilege of leadership. And I think some leaders feel that burden and hope that they can somehow get to the point where they can take off that crown, where they don't have that burden. Have you ever been able to pass that baton, or is it that weight and privilege stayed on the whole time?
I think it's, it's interesting. I don't know that I ever felt like I had a crown. I think you can feel responsibility maybe, right? And the pressure that comes from that. But I will say I always felt like a fraud, if anything. As I was building and, maybe from the outside, maybe having some success, right? People think, oh my gosh, Troy, you're so young to be doing this. You're so young to be doing that. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. And I always felt like a fraud. Like legitimately, it's like, yeah, they have no idea. I'm one step from the edge and have no idea what I'm doing, And so if anything, I would say I'm more likely to say I felt like a fraud more than I had this crown. Does that make sense? I
It does
almost say
completely.
I feel the exact opposite. I never felt like I had a crown. I always felt like I was I was a fraud and just lucky to be where I'm at.
Did that ever go away?
I don't think so. No, I still feel that same way. You know, so no, I don't. If anything, I feel the exact opposite.
If that ever goes away, let me know, because I feel like that every day.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's a common trait with entrepreneurs. You know, I mean, you've worked your ass off to get where you're at, and you've taken some risk, like real risk, you know, and worked hard, taking advantage of opportunities. But I don't. I think, you know, feeling like that I don't know, fraud or, you know, whatever. Do you deserve to be where you are? Have had the success you have? And I think it's a common trait for entrepreneurs to feel that way.
Well, I hope take a moment to look at yourself through the eyes of the people that see you. I have mad respect for you, and you've been a great mentor and a great example of being a phenomenal leader. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, I you know, I do work hard. I do think I handle stress and responsibility well, but yeah, at no point do I feel like I've got that crown on my head or whatever. Not at all. Not at all. But thank you, Court. I really appreciate that.
I have one last question. Have you written a book, or will you?
No, I don't know that I will. I don't know that I have anything that profound to, you know, as you guys have just experienced. I don't
I
don't
think it's
think I
the
have
opposite
anything
to me
that profound to actually say, you know, and so no, I don't see anything like that in the future at all. You know, I enjoy talking about my experience. You know, I could see me, you know, talking to, you know, other entrepreneurs or other podcasts or something like that, because I do enjoy talking about it, and I do think I've made enough mistakes along the way that I can share, you know, some of that, which I don't think we covered half of them, or many of them, but you know, I think being in business is learning from your mistakes, because you will make them, you know, and just try to do better the next day.
Troy,
Treat people well. They
thanks,
deserve
brother.
it.
Thank you so much, Troy.
Okay.
This was amazing.
Thanks, guys.
You've been watching Hello Grow, the world's #1 growth podcast. I'm Cortland Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza. If you've watched this video so far, it means that you like the content that we're putting out and the people we're interviewing.
We're putting together a community of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders. You liking, subscribing, and sharing this content helps us reach those that are going on that journey.
If you want to be a part of this community, please subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications.